When people talk about not being able to travel, they usually cite one of two reasons. The first being money. That is definitely a concern, and I have a whole video dedicated to ways to save money while traveling. The more pressing issue I think that I'm going to talk about today is time, and how to actually schedule out time for travel, because so many of us are limited in so many ways. Hello, if you're new here, my name's Nora. I love travel. I love making videos, and I'm so happy that you're here, and hopefully you learned something from this video. But before we get into it too closely, a couple disclaimers. The first disclaimer, I'm based in the US where time is pretty limited. The US notoriously has really bad PTO policies. There's not a ton of time. Most people, the average American, has 2 weeks off for vacation a year, in addition to a couple holidays scattered around. So in the US, at least, we're working with really limited time off, and it's such a privilege even to have that time off to travel. So definitely working at a bit of a deficit, but all this video is going to be is from the perspective of someone in the US. If you are based in other countries, or if your job has a more robust PTO policy, then that might be a little bit different, and you might have either more or less options. The second disclaimer before we get started is that I'm fully aware that travel is such a luxury right now. The world, particularly the start of 2026, has felt really heavy. Travel and the idea of like taking off and going somewhere new can be seen as such like a luxury because most people are just trying to make ends meet. I fully recognize that, but I also recognize that travel should not be something that's reserved for only the extreme wealthy. So in these videos, I'm trying to give you actionable tips to make travel happen for you, no matter the stage or financial situation that you have. And then final disclaimer, when we talk about time off for travel, most people have the restraint of work. Obviously, there's lots of other restraints, whether or not you have a family, kids, pets, a mortgage, if you're in school, but the vast majority of people, I think, that are trying to do really cool trips but just don't have necessarily enough time for it is because of work and because of, like I said, those really limited PTO policies. So most of the video, I'm going to be kind of addressing it through that lens, like ways to hack the system to give you more time to travel. But obviously, once again, you know your life circumstances the best. And okay, before we get in, I do want to talk just really quickly about the concept of time. This either really interests people or it makes them super bajiggity. I'm not sure which one you are, but time is kind of the great equalizer. Money is not equal at all. That's part of the struggles of modern day society, is that money is not equal at all. But time, for the most part, is. No matter how rich or wealthy you are, time keeps passing, and time keeps passing for everyone, which can freak some people out, but I think is actually comforting. The other big thing between money and time is that money is objectively a made-up concept. Like, we've decided as a society that money is important, but time just is. Like, time is something that is, part of the human condition, and time is just more natural. And I don't think the passing of time necessarily has to be a bad thing, but that's for a whole other video. When it comes to travel and experiencing new things, time can actually slow down when you're experiencing something new. This is called the novelty effect, which is the idea that if you are doing new things and having new experiences, time goes slower, which is actually really cool. And it makes sense, right? Like, if you're doing the same thing every single day, waking up, going to the gym, going to work, going home, cooking dinner, watching TV, going to bed, your days start to repeat, and that causes time to go quicker in your brain. Whereas if you're always doing new experiences, time actually slows down because you're making new memories. That's the novelty rule. This is why, you can't remember last Tuesday, but you can remember that vacation that you took when you were a kid. So it's really ironic, and the irony is not lost on me, that the one thing, or one of the one things we can do to slow down time is actually something that we don't have time to do. So, different from my budget video, but in this video, I'm gonna kind of give you 3 sort of concepts to sit with to try to, number 1, give you time back, and number 2, give you the benefits of the novelty rule without having to go off on a super lavish, luxurious trip. Okay, the first piece of advice when it comes to finding more time to travel is probably the most common one that's on the internet, which is just maximizing your PTO. In the US, in general, everyone has about 2 weeks off and then give or take about like 9 or so holidays. And there are ways that you can hack the holidays and the time off that's already given to you to actually stretch your 10 or so days of PTO to like 30 or 40 days that can be dedicated to a trip. This is an awesome way to kind of spread out your PTO. This is an awesome way to maximize the time that you have off, but this does ensure that you're going to be traveling a lot all around the holidays. So if you're thinking about doing this route, here's a couple things that I recommend. The first is thinking about trips that are closer to you than you might actually think that you can reasonably do if you spread out a long weekend. So for example, it's January, we just had MLK weekend, and I'm on the East Coast, and everyone always forgets that like Canada is a short hop flight away. Quebec, they speak a different language there. That's just so cool. And you can travel there pretty quickly. Also, Iceland is not that far away from the US, or at least from the Eastern US. That's another amazing trip that theoretically you could do in a couple days if you would extend a long weekend. The key with the PTO and like hacking it is using the weekends and having the weekends add to your trip versus take it away. And the other disclaimer here is that with this, you would be kind of giving up like family time. If you're someone that travels home for the holidays, you would have to give up that in order to travel in a lot of ways, but it doesn't have to be like one extreme or the others. You could reasonably, if you have 10 days of PTO, take 1 week, go on a trip, and then use the remaining 5 days of PTO for 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, MLK Day, President's Day, and you could have a lot of smaller trips, and that comes out to a decent amount of travel. Would you be able to necessarily do a full multi-month trip around the world or through hike or anything like that? No, not necessarily, but it does offer up some options. And while we're on the topic of work, I think if you want to do one of those bigger trips, it can be worth it to just ask your HR. It can be worth it to see if your company does some sort of sabbatical or long-term time off. Even if you think they're gonna say no, like there's literally no harm in asking, especially if you've been at the company for a couple years and you have a good repertoire with them. Sometimes all you need to get more time off is just to ask. So that's enough for all the corporate talk. These next couple tips are like ways to process things. Mindset shifts are a little bit more abstract, but I think they can actually end up being more helpful. Okay, my next tip is to get super comfortable with local adventures that you don't necessarily need to take a ton of time off work for. I think that social media has kind of led us to think that a trip only counts as a trip and we only get the health benefits of a trip if it's super far off, if it's in like a different corner of the world, or if it takes months and months and it's difficult to get to. But the actuality is that all the benefits of traveling, all the benefits of the novelty rule actually can happen pretty close to home. And one step further than that, I think social media has really put the bias towards these coveted cities where you can do super cool things, and if you don't live in those cities, there's nothing cool to do, which is actually could not be further from the truth. And as I think one reason amongst many why social media is messing with our brains and actually doing us probably more harm in the long term than good. So I'm gonna use myself as an example. I live in Washington, DC. DC is nowhere near on the top outdoorsy cities in the US, maybe a little bit for traveling to see the city itself, but DC actually has so much to offer that doesn't necessarily come up a lot in like travel news, okay? So for example, in DC, if you wanna get outdoors, there's mountains less than an hour away that you can take public transportation to. There's the beach a couple hours another way. There's trains up to New York and Philly and Boston. There's buses down to Richmond. Even within the city itself, there's Rock Creek Park, which is like a massive wooded park in the middle of the city that can actually, when you're inside it, you can feel like you're in a forest. Like I live in the heart of the city and I can get to a forest basically in like 10 minutes. Which is crazy. That's DC as an example, but even if you don't live like in New York City or Seattle or Denver or LA or San Diego, like there are so many local adventures to have that we as a society are just not utilizing enough because we've been taught that the only way to have a trip is to go to big extremes for it. So please do not discount your local adventures. Pretty much everyone likes being outside for the most part. So if you are in in a city or if you are in a town, odds are that there's some sort of park near you, and that's how you get the ball rolling. And it means also, if you're leaning into these local adventures, like having busy weekends and maybe not having like a Sunday reset, or maybe not being able to like go to bed on Sunday and go to work on Monday like fully rested. But that's okay. Like, we're allowed to be a little tired in life at the expense of having an amazing experience and having a more memorable weekend. Having more local adventures does more to make you better and healthier long term, because instead of constantly waiting like, okay, if I can just make it to August, I'll go on my big trip to Italy and then everything will be well. Instead of doing that, like, you're actually looking forward to multiple weekends. I think a good way to start this is to try to dedicate one weekend a year to doing some sort of like local adventure. This doesn't even have to be an overnight thing. This can literally just be like a day trip or going to somewhere new. So like one weekend a year going to somewhere new that is outside of your city, outside of your town, but still close, so that you can do it in a weekend. I just feel so passionately about this because social media is wrecking the travel world in a lot of ways. Like, yes, it's showing you so many cool and amazing far out places, but there's so much beauty in the beauty and the nature and the outdoors and the cultural experiences that are already around you. And don't just assume that the grass is greener because something is geographically far away. Okay, this last sort of mindset shift, I might have to explain a little bit. It's essentially like combining more adventurous experiences to things that you already do. So I think the easiest example here is work trips. Like, if you're already traveling for work, finding ways to add on an additional travel experience. So if you are in a new city for work, like taking an evening, and when you're not working, like going out and exploring. That's like what it is in the most abstract. The other is, if you already have to travel somewhere, like say you already have to go home for the holidays, or you already have to go to this city because there's a wedding there, like combining life events with travel and adventures. The most adventurous and travel savvy people that I know do this naturally. Like, if they have to go to a work trip, you can bet once they're done for the day, they're not sitting in their hotel and they're going out and exploring the city. Or if they have to, you know, go somewhere for a wedding, they're flying in like an evening early or staying a day late and like exploring the area. This can be really effective, but it also means that you kind of have to get comfortable with only seeing a little bit. But in my opinion, if the option is, you know, seeing New York City for one night versus not seeing New York at all, I'm gonna choose to see New York City. On a bigger scale, this can look like if you're going on a longer trip, like utilizing layovers. So, you know, having an extended layover, you can honestly like add a new country to your trip. And this can also look like, even at the smallest sense, like if you have to do like a 3-hour drive to go see a friend, or if you have to, you know, go home for something, like figuring out what you can do along the way. Like, I keep saying, all the health benefits of travel like do not kick in once you get like a certain amount of miles from home. Like, there's actually so much beauty you can have just around where you are. And then one final kind of bonus tip, I think that one way to also add more time to your travels and to your experiences is to look for smaller experiences that you can have like within your town or city. So this can look like a cuisine that you're not normally used to. This can look like language learning classes. This can look like cultural events that are put on by different cities. All of those things can kind of help you also experience the novelty rule without necessarily going out and traveling around the world. So obviously we can't stop time, and there's no video that's going to allow us to do that. There's no hacks for stopping time, but there are things that you can do, like I said, to add more time or to make it feel like you have more time. Talking to work, figuring out how to maximize PTO, incorporating all these local adventures, kind of hacking our brains to experience the novelty rule without actually having to travel around the world. My final thing is that time is gonna pass either way, and time passes for everyone. So it's like, if the time is gonna pass either way and you wanna travel, you might as well put in the effort to make it happen, to allow yourself to experience that adventure. I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for watching this video. I'm hoping for novel experiences and time slowing down for all of us in the near future. I'll see you in the next one.